Good evening. Hello, everybody. This is session 5 of 6 of the Lifelong Issues in Adoption. This is brought to you by the Central Missouri Foster Care and Adoption Association. I am Denise Rice. It's great to be with you again. Again, 5 of 6. So after tonight, we have one more, the first Tuesday in October, and then that completes the series of webinars online again for the Lifelong Issues in Adoption. So happy you could join us, whether it's live or you're going to be watching this on a recorded broadcast later on. I hope this finds you well. Happy September. Probably transitioning, getting kids back into school, kind of starting with the fall season, some changes. So again, I hope things are going really well for you, and that you found these sessions to be useful and helpful to you, maybe in bringing up some components of these core issues that you haven't thought about, or maybe are not an issue for you right now, but things that you can just kind of store in your piggy bank in your brain that you can refer back to at a later time. So with that, today's topic is on intimacy. This is probably one of the more difficult and challenging core issues for folks to think about and kind of process, and how does it relate to me, and whatever your role is in the adoption experience and in the adoption story. So we're going to go through and how intimacy presents itself for all the parties involved in adoption. Come up with a couple of strategies, some interventions on kind of, first and foremost, always keeping those lines of communication open between our adopted children and if you are in the parent caregiving role. And then we'll also touch on siblings and extended family. And then we will wrap up with some additional interventions kind of from a family response when dealing with intimacy. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And if we finish early, then we finish early. So I'm going to go through all the material that I have for you. Not sure how long that's going to take. Makes it kind of hard to judge when this isn't in a format where we can have, you know, kind of question and answer, whether it's face-to-face or even online. So we're going to go till we're done, and then we will conclude next month with mastery and control. So looking forward to that final session with you all as well. So let's get started. So when we're talking about intimacy with regards to the core issues in adoption, the question I want to throw out there to all of you to think about first and foremost is, when have you held back a part of yourself in an intimate relationship? When have you been hesitant or reserved to kind of go all in a relationship? And what was that like for you? And what was that about? Where was your reservation and apprehension coming from? So think about that as we kind of explore this topic again. When have you held back a part of yourself in an intimate relationship? And what are the pieces and the components that went into that? So intimacy is really defined as, you know, avoiding closeness and commitment, holding back a part of yourself in a relationship. And when you don't feel close to people, kind of in general. When we as human beings have been in situations where we have been traumatized in the context of a relationship, it's not surprising that we are a little bit ambivalent and sometimes even very hesitant to kind of jump into any future relationships. So again, when we think about our children, our youth, our young adults, maybe who have, again, experienced trauma, have experienced trauma in the context of a relationship. And really, what all the research and the neuroscience is telling us is that if somebody has been traumatized in the context of a relationship, they're only going to heal in the context of a relationship. So relationships, human connections, are really the key to healing trauma and traumatic experiences that have happened in the past. And that can become a significant challenge when you as the individual, because you have been traumatized in relationships, have put up the wall, have, protected yourself, have come up with coping mechanisms, behavior strategies, whatever you want to call it, to protect yourself from being hurt again, which then inhibits you from kind of jumping headfirst into relationships and connections. And that can include intimate relationships. As you move through kind of the developmental models in life, and start having, significant connections and relationships with other people. So having experienced loss, rejection, self-esteem, and identity issues, adoptees may struggle with intimacy issues. And I don't think that's surprising to anybody. They may have a diminished capacity or resistance to attachment. And again, that goes back to what I was just talking about. When we have been traumatized or hurt or let down by our primary caregivers when we were younger, it naturally, kind of sends these messages to us, creates these working models, these templates in our brain on how we look at adults and caregivers, and that they can't be trusted, and that they're not reliable, and they're not dependable, and that I can only take care of myself. And then that translates into the individual self-concept and self-esteem of, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, if it was a poor interaction early on, versus those who experienced the attachment cycle in a positive way have a very different view about life, love, family, and relationships. So that's really important to keep in mind too, especially when we're talking about intimacy. Adoptive parents with unresolved grief may struggle with intimacy issues, which can also kind of flow into marital issues as well. The multiple ongoing losses in adoption, coupled with feelings of rejection, shame, and grief, as well as possibly an incomplete sense of self, may impede the development of intimacy for all parties involved in adoption. And, one maladaptive way to avoid possible reenactment of previous losses is to avoid getting close, and is to avoid commitment at all costs. So a couple other things just kind of on intimacy in general before we kind of move into the different parties involved, and we'll start with adoptees or those that were adopted. People who are confused about their identity may have difficulty getting close to anyone, and people who have had significant losses in their life may fear getting close to others because of the risk of experiencing loss again. And I think that's just a human response when we have experienced loss, is we want to protect ourselves. We want to take whatever steps we can to prevent that hurt and that pain from happening again. And the multiple ongoing losses in adoption, coupled with feelings of, again, we talked about this, rejection and shame, impedes the development of intimacy. And again, there is that apprehension of closeness and commitment. So let's start with adoptees. Let's kind of look at how intimacy might play out and what that might look like. So again, these are general. This does not mean that every person who was adopted is going to experience all of these different components with regards to adoption. This is just kind of the cumulative list of what you might see or what they might experience. So first, they may fear intimate relationships with others if they do not know of biological relatives. And so there's a fear of getting involved with potential biological family members, including siblings, and that they want to try to decrease the chances of unknowingly becoming involved with a birth relative that they didn't know that they had. Or adoptees may fear intimate relationships if they do not have a sense of their medical or genetic history, fear of what they might pass on to future generations if they have children of their own. They also may struggle with getting close to others as a result of their early challenges with bonding and attachment, which we've talked about. Some adoptees declare kind of a lifetime emptiness related to a longing for the birth parent they may have never known, and that obviously can impede the ability to connect wholeheartedly, openly, honestly with another human being. Also for adoptees, intimacy issues are particularly evident in relationships with the opposite sex, and can revolve around questions about the adoptees, birth story, how they were conceived, biological and genetic concerns, as well as sexuality. When there's bonding and attachment issues, it's going to decrease a person's capacity for intimacy. And then adoptees may ask, questions like, how close can I get to somebody? How close should I get to somebody? Am I going to be rejected in this relationship like I was rejected in previous relationships? And so again, I think you guys are kind of getting the sense of how a lot of these different core issues kind of overlap and kind of flow into one another through the course of one's life. So sometimes then when the adoptee then becomes a parent, there might be feelings about, fearing, again, intimate relationships. What am I going to pass genetically onto my children, especially if I don't know much about my history or my past. So some adopted individuals have reported that they are aware of holding back part of themselves in relationships, that they're always cautious and watchful. Some even indicate that they've never truly felt close to anybody, kind of always been on guard, always had that wall up to a degree. Others report a lifetime of feelings of emptiness, which they relate to a longing for maybe a birth parent that they maybe have never seen. For some children who were adopted, the placement and subsequent losses may have disrupted early bonding and attachment. The associated anxiety may have interfered with relationships in the adoptive family as well. And, children who might be coming from orphanages or institutions where they've had multiple caregivers and no single clear attachment figure may have great difficulty relaxing and relating into their new adoptive family. They may remain continually anxious and clingy or ambivalent and avoidant. Adoptees' intimacy issues are particularly evident in relationships with the opposite sex and may revolve around questions, again, about conception, biological, genetic concerns. And adoptees as adults may find themselves staying in unhealthy relationships or may avoid intimate relationships altogether in order to avoid a potential loss. So for a young child, intimacy is really measured in peer relationships and peer friendships and in a child's relationship with their parents. If a child is struggling with adoption issues, it can interfere with all of their interactions. Grief, shame, loss, and rejection may motivate a child to steer clear of any type of relationships with potential to bring more of the same onto them. I have a quote here from the original researchers on the core issues that I want to read to you. And it goes, adoptive parents report that their adopted children seem to hold back a part of themselves in the relationship. Adoptive mothers indicate, for example, that even as an infant, the adoptee was, quote, not cuddly. Many adoptees as teens state that they have truly never felt close to anyone. Some youngsters declare a lifetime of emptiness related to longing for a birth parent. And that's from Kaplan, Roja, and Silverstein. So many times it's a relationship or marital issue that causes adult adoptees to seek out counseling services regarding this topic. Often adoption issues are the cause of relationship issues, but sometimes they simply can exacerbate a main level concern. One reason for this is that it is often not until typically the late 20s or 30s, again, depending on a variety of factors, when we are neurologically developed enough to fully process all the complexities and impacts adoption has had on one's life. Struggles with identity and fear of becoming rejected or abandoned again can contribute again to the struggles, the apprehension, the sense of pause of wanting to pursue intimate relationships. And if there's been any trauma in a parental sibling or romantic relationship in the past, that can also interfere with intimacy. So let's move on and talk about adoptive parents and how intimacy affects adoptive parents. So first, infertility treatments may have robbed adoptive parents of the joy of intimacy, or the feelings associated with infertility and medical procedures may have negative effects on the couple's relationship. They may also avoid closeness with their child because they fear rejection and loss. So think about how this plays out if you've got a child who is scared and who is afraid of being rejected and who has experienced losses and has put up the wall and is trying to keep themselves safe, and you've got a parent who, you know, is also fearing rejection or has some previous loss issues that have come up again. And then you put those together and you think about how can you truly establish a healthy relationship, parent-child relationship. And again, if you've been traumatized in a relationship, you're only going to heal in a relationship. But when we are so apprehensive because of our previous experiences or what we fear might happen, that is going to inhibit our abilities to connect. And human beings, we know, are designed to be in relationships. We are designed to connect to other people. We are not designed to live in isolation. This can become very, very tricky. Again, when you've got parents and you've got children who are struggling with the same types of issues, and maybe unknown to each other, are putting up the protective barriers, which is inhibiting the capacity for that true, intense relationship that so desperately needs to take place. Parents who adopt older children do not have a chance to develop intimacy with their child the way parents do with an infant, such as going through, again, changing their diaper and bathing them, having the experience really where your child is completely dependent on you, and doing all of those things that I'm sure a lot of people have dreamed about doing with babies. And that is a loss. Some adoptive parents report that their adopted children hold back, don't seem to really put all of themselves out there. And I think, again, if you come from a trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive or trauma-responsive, whatever term you want to use, type of framework, you would understand where that's coming from, and that it's not personal. And the one thing that I think a lot of people in our world of foster care and adoption struggle with is not taking behaviors or not taking actions personally, when it really is all based on previous experiences with people who are no longer in the picture. But that's very difficult to do when you are giving 110% of yourself to somebody else, and it's not being reciprocated. And we might understand why it's not being reciprocated. It still hurts, and it's still very challenging not to take these things personally. So I absolutely understand that. Adoptive parent may have unresolved grief over losses that may lead to intimacy or marital problems. And again, may avoid closeness with their adopted child, with the adoptee, to avoid any potential loss or heartache or pain or hurt. Some adoptive parents, again, have stated that they fear intimacy because it reminds them of the pain of infertility or not being able to have their own biological child. And and they may fear closeness with their children because of potential rejection by them. And then when you look at adoptive parents as grandparents, which is kind of interesting, some of the comments are that, they fear closeness with my grandchildren because of potential rejection by them, especially if the birth grandparents have come back into the picture. So there is sometimes generational emotions and feelings that continue, even as your role goes from an adoptive parent to an adoptive grandparent. Sorry, I have an itch and it's not going away. All right. And with regards to the adoptive couple's relationship, it may have been, significantly harmed by the intrusive nature of medical procedures and the scapegoating or potential blame that may have led to or been part of the diagnosis of maybe not being able to have biological children or infertility issues. And then these residual effects may become a hallmark of the later relationship. If those pieces are not dealt with appropriately, if we're not, again, kind of working therapeutically as a couple, as a unit, working through the feelings tied to that experience, they have to go somewhere. And they don't necessarily just kind of disappear and go away on their own. So just really encourage you just to be mindful of some of these components too. And even if you'd worked on it before, if you start noticing that some things are coming up again, it might be time to revisit that. And that is absolutely normal, especially when we go through different developmental stages, particularly as adults. So some adoptive parents find themselves challenged to move past their children's barriers and to create close, secure attachments and significant, healthy relationships with them. This process can take years and may have to be reworked again and again as our children grow, as they change and struggle to incorporate the adoption experience into who they are, as well as who they will become. So again, our children are struggling with their whole identity. Who am I? How do I fit into this world? Ongoing grief and loss issues. Then we have the guilt and shame that's tied into that. We have rejection that is interwoven into all of this. And so it can get very complicated, and it's very confusing, I think, for a lot of people to understand and to be able to name the different emotions and experiences that they're having. So one gift that parents have in this, this whole experience is to really be mindful and to really pay attention to owning and naming your own feelings and emotions so that you can then help your children be able to name and to talk about in a safe relationship, in a trusting relationship. That really is, I think, foundational and pivotal to creating the type of relationship that our children and our adolescents desperately need. But we have to model certain behavior, and we have to model, again, how we feel and speaking about it and acknowledging that we all have feelings and emotions, and what are you going to do about it? What are you gonna do to, again, to kind of own it for what it is, and then be able to be that safe, regulated caregiver that our kids and our youth so desperately need, so that they in turn can start to work on their own feelings and emotions and learn healthy, appropriate ways on what to do with those, and how to channel those. So there's a great opportunity there for, I think, both adults and our children or youth or our young adult adoptees as well. Working on the intimacy issues requires a great deal of trust, communication, and vulnerability from children as well as from adults. A parent must be willing to discuss topics that are uncomfortable, for example, infertility, which is not an easy topic to talk about, and be willing to participate in painful conversations. For example, a child wishing that their birth parent was around or that they had some connection or some relationship with them. It's up to the parent to introduce adoption subjects and to be willing to accept the notion of a child's biological family as an intimate part of their own and who they are. A parent who's distressed or embarrassed talking about personal issues or who refuses to visit the dark side of adoption really is not going to be helpful to their child and probably will not get many opportunities at parent-child intimacy. So again, I go back to kind of what I've talked about before in previous sessions, which is what's shareable is bearable. When we can mention it, then we can deal with it. You know, again, these are not easy subject matter to discuss. These are not topics that come easy, I think, for anybody to discuss, but it's the truth, and it's our truth in the adoption world. It's the reality of a lot of the experiences that many of us have been faced with or have been challenged with, if you will. And I, you know, I go back to, I believe that within every crisis is an opportunity. And so it might be difficult. It might be something new. Some of us don't do well with change. It's fear of the unknown. But really, the best way to deal with things is to confront it head on. So now let's talk a little bit about birth parents and birth parents related or how they're involved or might be impacted by intimacy issues. So birth parents may connect the loss of their child with the particular sexual encounter that led to the pregnancy, and so then therefore fears intimacy because they believe that those sexual experiences ultimately just lead to loss. Birth parents may question their ability to parent a child successfully. In some instances, the birth parents fear intimacy in relationships with the opposite sex, fear intimacy in relationships with family, or subsequent children that they may have down the road. One birth parent was quoted as saying, "I fear intimacy because other close relationships have led to significant losses." Difficulty resolving issues with other birth parents may interfere with future relationships, and intimacy may be equated with loss. And again, you cannot have an adoption without loss. The two go hand in hand. And then if we're talking about the birth parent kind of in the role as a parent, they might ask things like, can I really be close to these children because of my past? Maybe because I was not able to parent one of my children. So then questioning kind of that self-doubt of how can I, you know, really get close to other children that I may have when I wasn't able to fulfill this role previously. And then if we're talking about birth grandparents, a question might be, can I be close to other grandchildren if I allowed one child to be placed or to have an adoption plan? All right, and then let's look at siblings. So adopted siblings and extended family may see the adoptee as an intrusion, which is going to bar any capacity for intimacy. Secret keeping and avoidance of some issues in history may prevent the development of intimacy. Some questions to consider when you have other children in the home and you might be pursuing an adoption are, does your family communicate openly, honestly? Are you talking to your children about the process on adoption? How much do you share? Do you just talk? Do you show videos? Do you use books, life books? What role do children have in making the decision to pursue adoption in your family? And have you thought about how the adoption will impact their lives on a daily basis? Have you asked that question of your children? What is their interpretation? How do they think the adoption is going to change their family dynamics. How is it going to impact their time with you as the parent? What is going to change in the household? Space might change, personal space. They might now have to share, and maybe they have their own room. There's potentially going to be a lot more appointments, or possibly people coming to the home, going to just kind of change your routine. Are they worried? What fears, concerns do they have about a child coming into their home and their space? And for some kids, if they're younger, they're just worried about their stuff, their toys, their belongings, things like that. But these are questions that you should be revisiting on a continuous basis, not a one and done type of conversation. Siblings may fear close relationships because maybe their older sibling was adopted, and how close can I really get to my parents? So some apprehension, so maybe some fear there. So one technique when we're talking about communication and how critical it is kind of for all of these issues, there is a technique called the Pebbles technique, and it was created by the authors of the book Real Parents, Real Children. And it's Holly Van Gulden and Lisa Bartles Rab. And so the Pebbles technique is used to open a conversation about a sensitive adoption topic. So Pebbles are really one-liners, not conversations, that raise an issue and then are allowed to ripple until a child is ready to pick up on it. So one example might be mentioning your child's beautiful black hair and wondering out loud if she got her hair from her birth mother, essentially throwing out a conversation pebble for the child to catch. If a child chooses not to respond to the pebble, the parent has still communicated a willingness and ability to talk about a difficult subject matter, and can toss out another pebble at another time. I think these are great techniques. So because adopted children are fearful of hurting their adoptive parents, and sometimes are unwilling to risk rejection, parents must be the discussion initiators. Parents must model understanding and acceptance, and proactively be part of a child's internal world. An unaddressed intimacy issue can quietly decimate an important relationship, leaving a child alienated and a parent sad and confused. How intimate we are with our young children now will have direct repercussions on their teen years. So there's a quote from the book that I want to share with you. And it starts, when in an open, accepting environment in which the child can talk about and tackle adoption-related issues is established early on, the child will feel freer to turn to his parents to talk about problems as a teen. If parents deny their child's feelings or sweep them under the rug, then the family, parents and the child alike, will have no system for addressing them when they intensify in adolescence. So you start the conversation when they're younger. You lay the foundation when they're younger. You let them know that you are a safe, trusting person that they can talk to about all kinds of topics, regardless of how difficult they think it might be or how painful it might be. When you throw those pebbles out repeatedly, because the brain only learns through repetition as well. So when you throw those pebbles out repeatedly, a child will pick up on one or two here or there when it's a topic or when it's a subject that they want to delve deeper into. But the fact that you continually put those pebbles out there tells them, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. And we all know, for those of us that have lived with or had been a teenager, how critical that would be for kind of, again, laying that foundation, setting that trusting relationship. You know, we want our teens to come to us. I don't want my teens going to their peer group for information, because half the time it's wrong or they're getting it off the internet. I want them to be able to come to me. I want to be that go-to person for them. And one surefire way to make sure that that happens is you start when they're younger. So I hope some of you, if you haven't heard of that or you haven't used that technique, that you might try that. Because I think, again, what's shareable is bearable. When we put those pieces out there, we say, I'm okay with it. I'm here for you. I can hold this space with you. No judgment. You know, when you're ready, whatever you need, I'm here for you. I think that's what we all want as parents, for our kids and especially for our adolescents. So I want to talk about, really when there's some kind of discord or maybe fallout in adoption, it oftentimes can be a blessing in disguise. When our children's sadness, anger, confusion, and questions are all there for us parents to pick up and run with now, perhaps circumventing some of the bigger outbursts in adolescence, that's truly a gift. Adoption issues will continue to reappear at times of transition throughout our children's lives when they enter school, when there's a move, a marriage, pregnancy and birth, a divorce, a medical issue, death of friends and family, midlife issues, and then when we go into older stages of adult life. How our children handle each challenge depends on their personality and on their preparation. The 7 core issues and certain parenting prescriptions give us tools to interpret our children's thoughts and emotions and allow us the insight to guide them to self-awareness. We can't fix the fallout, but we can help our children with their feelings and with their healing. Healing happens in the context of relationship, especially when the trauma occurred in the context of a relationship. We can demonstrate our own resiliency and teach our sons and daughters that the journey of adoption is more than survivable, that it has shaped them in remarkable ways, and with our help can also make them strong, powerful. And I don't mean powerful with, I have a lot of power, but I mean power within themselves, the recognition of what they can do, what they can accomplish, that we can instill a sense, a self-esteem, a self-worth that is of the utmost importance, that we can validate, that we can normalize certain experiences and feelings and emotions for them, but that we can come alongside them. And like I said before, that we can hold that space with them. That sometimes us as parents and with our kids, that we are struggling with some of the same emotions and same feelings. But again, guys, I'm going to go back to, again, what's shareable is bearable. We as the adults have to get over our hang up of having some of these courageous conversations. So again, if you need guidance and you need support on that, reach out to your organization, reach out to the Central Missouri Foster Care and Adoption Association, reach out to your local support group, connect with your therapist or clinician if you have one, talk to some other adoptive parents, talk about it, have the conversations. Again, the more that we put it out there, the more that we figure out ideas and strategies, the better off we're going to be. So finally, tonight, what I want to kind of wrap up with are some family responses with regards to intimacy. And this is in some information that I included, some handouts in the first couple sessions. But I just kind of want to go back and revisit it again. So be a role model of healthy relationships with all of the other people in your life. These provide numerous and endless teaching opportunities for your child. Learn about attachment needs at each stage of the human development process. And one thing that I want to share with you, in case you don't know, is 20 years when I first got in this field, we were of the belief that if a child especially did not seem to connect or attach to adults by a certain age, we collectively as a community and as a society were under the belief that they were never going to be able to connect and attach to adults. So we need to keep them in higher levels of care, institutions, mental health hospitals, things like that. What we know now with regards to the neuroscience of the brain and brain development is that we know that the part of the brain Where attachment starts and where attachment continues throughout the course of life is actually open to growing and changing throughout the entire lifespan, which means we as human beings have the capacity to connect and attach to other human beings until the day we die. Until the day we die, we can connect and we can attach, even if we as human beings experience disrupted attachments early in life. That part of the brain is open to changing and growing throughout the entire lifespan. So that also is the hope and healing. That is also why it is so critical at any age that we are continually introducing and practicing and sharing and connecting in relationships to one another. It's critical. It's critical to human development. It's critical to human beings. Our children need it. Our adolescents need it. Our young adults need it. All of us need it, deserve it, and we are entitled to it. Seek activities that will enhance trust and attachment within your family. Create a new family tradition that begins after placement or after an adoption is finalized, so that your child is a part of the creation of your family history and your family story. Talk about what that can look like for your family. Talk to other families and what have they done and how have they honored and celebrated this? What do you do? Some of you already do things. So demonstrate to your child that you have chosen them and that the choice is a permanent commitment. The way that we demonstrate our commitment is through our behavior and through our interactions on a daily basis, day after day, week after week, month after month. That is how we demonstrate commitment, that we chose them. So that whole claiming process, we chose them, and my commitment to you looks like this, not just in words, but my commitment. This is how I demonstrate my commitment every minute of every day, every week, every month, every year. What does that look like for you? How do you demonstrate your commitment to your kids? How do you demonstrate your commitment to your partner? We also have to be very mindful to take care of that co-parenting relationship. If you are a two-parent household, whatever that looks like, that relationship needs to be nurtured. That relationship needs to have time just to nurture and support that connection and that relationship. You cannot put that relationship on the back burner and expect that it's going to survive long term. So I hope that you have opportunities, or that you find opportunities to be able to reconnect, to go on date nights, to spend quality time with your partner, to kind of take a break from the role of a parent to being a partner. Whatever that looks like for you in your household, that is critical. So I cannot emphasize enough, guys, take time for you and for your partner on a consistent basis, on a regular basis. It doesn't just keep going without us putting the work into it. And you guys all know, if you've been with somebody for a while, it's a full-time job on top of all the other jobs and responsibilities that you have. So please, in some way, make that a priority. Use respite if you need to, so that you can go out and have a break. Talk to other adoptive families. Can you watch my kids tonight? I'll watch your kids another night. Go do something that you enjoy together. Even if it's sitting on the couch watching a movie together, but with no distractions. Whatever that looks like, please take care of one another. And finally, seek support for yourself. And I'm going to go into, again, what is your self-care plan? What do you do to recharge your battery so that you continue to give to others who are dependent on you and who need you and who will take from you because they're supposed to? So again, you cannot give away that which is not yours to give. You cannot give away that which is not yours to give. You cannot effectively meet the needs of anybody else if you are running on empty. So what does that support piece, what does that self-care piece look like for you? Not only with your partner, what does it look like for you as an individual? We need you. Your children need you. Your partner needs you. You are important. You are critical. You are valued. You are amazing. And I want you to be able to continue to give and give and give and give. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys tonight. Thanks for joining. We will do this again the first Tuesday of October. That will be our last session through this series, and that'll be on mastery and control. And again, if anybody has any questions, comments, or feedback, if you're looking for any additional information, you can reach me at Denise Rice. It's DENISERICE, one word, at hotmail.com. Or if you want to contact the Central Missouri Foster Care and Adoption Association, they can forward my information to you as well. So with that, I hope you guys have a great night. Great rest of September. We'll do this again in October. I wish you guys the best. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.